What is life? A question that is just 3 words long has troubled generations for over decades as people do attempt to solve this really delicate question. According to Google, each and every month, 1 million people do attempt to ask it the question and hope for an answer of what life is. And this directly translates to 12 million people per year entering such data, questioning what life is. On the morrow, searching of about what life is did actually accelerate during the pandemic when people had nothing else to do in the world apart from just sitting around wearing masks and asking themselves what is the use of their being. In this video, I would like to present to you the true delicate intricacies of what life is in a biological perspective, which may eventually lead to the turning of heads, but in a more and well-delicated presented matter. Your life is ours to discuss. Well, truly, let's be honest. Whether you are a carpenter, whether you're a doctor that sells lives on a regular basis, or perhaps in the most unlikely ventures, if you are actually a terrorist who takes lives once in a while, you did indeed at one point in your life, whether you're sitting down at a staircase or you're drinking a soft drink, you must have asked yourself this question: why am I here? What is the purpose of my being? And why do I need to eat food every day? Am I alive only because I die? Or perhaps do we die only because we live? Which is which? And what is the true answer to this delicate, unfathomable question? To answer this question, we must dig deep into one of the most brilliant minds ever to exist in history. This is the mind of Erwin Schrödinger, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist who wrote a book in 1944 that was questioning on what life meant. And obviously the book was entitled What is Life? Through this book, he did actually struggle and try to understand and perhaps find the answer to what life meant, borrowing ideas that he derived from quantum physics, as he was a professional in quantum physics. And in this modern day and era at that time, quantum physics was all there was, and that was all that was to be thought of when someone was trying to solve a new idea. Some may actually say this was a spark of quantum biology, when biology did actually boom into the molecular direction. But that's a story of another day. But we understand from his book, What is Life? He did state that one of the most key aspects to pick of life is that it does violate the second law of thermodynamics. Otherwise though, does it? He clearly stated that the only way life ensures that it does not violate thermodynamics is by borrowing entropy. What does that mean? It means usually when you see life does occur in a perfect mixture, a combo of a well-organized soup of perfect temperature, pH, and condition, which has to be constant throughout for life to actually exist. And according to the laws of dynamics, entropy must always increase in a system. It means has to always go from orderliness to disorder. And yet we see in life, there's always an accurate maintenance of orderness for life to exist. So the question is, does life actually disobey physics, or does it not? Erwin Schrödinger noted that what life does in this case is to suck in entropy from elsewhere to ensure flow of physics. For example, you wake up in the morning and you take breakfast that contains eggs. Eggs contain proteins and carbohydrates. These are well-organized complex molecules, and by the end of the day, or maybe a week, you eventually excrete, in terms of heat, ammonia and carbon dioxide. These are molecules that are disorganized, which shows that there's been a flow of order to disorder. So instead of your own system undergoing this change of order to disorder, it borrows energy from other systems around its surroundings to forcefully push it into disorder. So technically, life only exists by absorbing energy and forcing disorder from orderly energy to ensure the homeostasis of entropy. And this is the only way that actually entropy is maintained. Hence, life does have physical credentials to actually exist. For context, those who do not understand entropy, it is basically the measure of disorder in the system. And when we say that living organisms increase entropy of other molecules, what we mean is simply this. If you to compare the molecules of carbon in carbohydrates, they are bound together in a specific intricate way. And if you compare them with the same number of carbon molecules in the atmosphere of carbon dioxide, we do see that these molecules are free and they're not bonded together, so they're more disordered than the molecules that are compact together in carbohydrates. So if we as living organisms take in carbohydrates that are organized and then we excrete out carbon dioxide that is more disorderly, it means now we are increasing the entropy of the system by increasing the disorder that there is. So what life does in this case is that instead of violating the law of not increasing its disorderliness, life just absorbs ordered molecules and increases their entropy and making them disordered. So basically what it does is that instead of its own entropy increasing, it increases entropy over the molecules. In that way, it has a fair exchange. Hence, generally, life exists by forcing other molecules to take its entropical path that it would have taken, and henceforth leading to the creation of its own constant entropical forces. It is more like, if at all you live in a world that whereby all molecules, all organisms must keep on moving from point A to point B and must not remain still. In this case, what life does is go into a subway and jump onto a train. In that way, life is still moving from point A to point B, but it's not doing it actively, but it's using other methods to do it. For example, by using a train in this case, the train is moving, but the person in the train is constant. Even though in the whole general output of life, the train is still moving, and generally by relativity, the person will move. So this is the same way that life does ensure it does not break the laws of physics. So we do conclude now that life is directly approved by physics laws, and there's no doubt about that. Back in 1944, as this book came out, Erwin Schrödinger has understood that life does ensure that it has a constant entropy. He wondered and questioned himself, how does it maintain that this knowledge is passed on to its offsprings? How does life ensure that all organisms in its own lineage will always ensure a homeostatic environment for its progression? This is where the brilliance of the moment happens. He identifies a hypothetical molecule that he calls an aperiodic crystal. Aperiodic because he did consider the fact that it should not be the same. It has to be varying with varying combinations of information. And henceforth, he called it aperiodic. He called it a crystal because it has to be stable, and the only way to ensure stability is by having high strong bonds, high strong chemical bonds, and this is where the word aperiodic crystal came about. Well, shockingly, 9 years down the road in 1953, there was the discovery of DNA by Watson and Francis Crick, of whom these personalities did dedicate their discovery from the inspiration having arose by the book written by Erwin Schrödinger all the way in 1944. So you do see how physics did eventually bleed into the discovery of molecular biology. And to put a further shock on the brilliance of Erwin Schrödinger, it was actually discovered that DNA does indeed have a varying number of nucleotide bases, and these are adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. And these bases do lead to creations of multiple combinations and variations that eventually lead to the consistency and maintenance of different information in a term of a code, a genetic code. which was directly answering the question of Alan Schrödinger about how the maintenance of a constant entropy within living organisms is passed down to generations. The discovery of the genetic material, DNA. And at this very modern day and age of era, it was the spark of discoveries, the introduction of molecular biology. Everyone was so excited to understand what DNA was. Eventually, through multiple experimentations and discoveries down the molecular biological field, it led to the discovery and understanding of RNA. Not so often and not so after this, a lot of comparisons started being drawn between RNA and DNA, and henceforth humanity later discovered that RNA and DNA are very similar molecules with a difference of only one nucleotide base, uracil, where we see that RNA contains uracil but DNA does not contain uracil. This, among plenty other differences that may come in terms of how many strands are bonded together, where RNA is just a single strand, DNA is a helix of double strands joined together. We do tend to see that these two molecules, apart from those differences, are really rather alike. It questions to beg and differ that, are they alike because they're the same, or is this by coincidence? This led to the rise of the RNA world hypothesis, where initially, before this period, people did believe that DNA was the mother of all molecules, and it henceforth, initially, people thought that DNA was the very beginning of life itself. But on the study of RNA, we do tend to see that RNA could have been actually the introductory phase of life as we know it. And why do we say this? From a biological aspect of life, we do understand that DNA has only mainly one role. That is formation of more RNAs that will eventually lead to the production of proteins and replication, and that's it. And it can non-directly produce proteins without forming RNA first through transcription. Now we do notice that for life to actually exist, we do need transfer of hereditary information, which DNA does. But there's another key aspect that we do not find in DNA, which is catalysis. Life cannot exist without catalysis, and this eventually led to a question of a chicken and egg kind of manner, where we tried to ask the question between proteins and DNA, which actually existed first. In a way, because for the formation of DNA, one actually does require enzymes that are protein in nature. And surprisingly, for the formation of these proteins, these enzymes, you do need to require information that is only written down in DNA. So the question at this point in time was between DNA and proteins, which came first. But rather unfortunately, the answer to this question did come out of somewhere else, and not a place for these two, but somewhere far, far different down the line. The culprit for this conjunction was actually RNA. We did notice that RNA has both those capabilities, the capability to store genetic information by having its nucleotides, at the same time the discovery of ribozymes. 1989 Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded to Dr. Robert Check and Sidney Altman for their discovery of ribozymes, the catalytic activity of RNA. This discovery did show that RNA now does not only have ability to store hereditary information through its own nucleotides, but at the same time it has the ability to carry out catalysis through ribosome formation. We did notice that these RNA molecules do fold in certain shapes and eventually lead to the production of catalysis. So RNA now does check both points for production of life, that is passing down of information through hereditary retainers of data by its nucleotides, but at the same time it does carry out catalysis through ribozymes. With all this in consideration, it begs the question that can RNA be considered alive? If one considers something alive, it must check off a list of characteristics of life. These characteristics include cellular organization, the ability to reproduce, metabolism, homeostasis, heredity, and evolution. These are key characteristics for an organism to be considered alive. If we to kick off with cellular organization, we do tend to see that RNA could be considered an organism that is organized. Usually in cell organization, there's only mainly two ways one can organize something, that is through unicellular or multicellular. And in unicellular, we do say it's just a group of molecules bound together in a membrane that are critically organized in a certain way. And now when we do see RNA, it's just basically a group of nucleotides that are joined together by bonds continuously, forming one unit. And it could be a unit of life, and henceforth it does in a way qualify to be considered as a cell of some sort. So it does check and does pass the cellular organization. Furthermore, if we do look into the direction of reproduction, we do tend to see that RNA has the ability to reproduce itself. How? One, through the formation of DNA, RNA can make more RNA, such as messenger RNAs or small RNAs or small nuclear RNAs. These are the other variations of RNAs that could be made from RNA through the formation of DNA initially. So if at all two RNA molecules do come together and they do mutate to form DNA, it could later on lead to the formation of other smaller RNAs. So that is indeed reproduction that could be kind of considered as sexual reproduction, in a way that we do kind of see two different molecules coming together to lead to the production of another molecule. What one would kind of relate to be similar to what actually does happen in the ordinary sexual reproduction. So in a way, you could look at it in this perspective of sexual reproduction occurring for RNA. Furthermore, we do see that metabolism does indeed occur, in a way that RNA has the ability to be a catalytic molecule through the formation of ribosomes. So in this way, it does lead to the formation and endorsement of different metabolic activities. So it does indeed eventually undergo metabolism, clicking off the list of metabolism. And for organisms to be really considered alive, it must clearly be responding to stimuli and adaptation and evolution. In response to stimuli, we do see, if you get most of these nucleotides and you place them in different concentrations of pH or salt concentrations, we see they either lengthen or they become shorter and wide. So this is a change that could be considered as a response chemically to stimuli. So RNA could still be taken and still be considered to respond to stimuli chemically, of course, depending on which kind of environment you do place it in, whether it is going to be placed in a higher salt concentration or lower salt concentration, or it's going to be placed in a different pH media. And likewise, eventually it does respond to whatever environment you put it in through shortening and broadening itself accordingly. Furthermore, we do tend to see that another key aspect of life that RNA does actually possess is the ability to evolve. So eventually we see that RNA does evolve to become DNA, whereby it replaces one of its nucleotides, that is uracil, with thymine, and furthermore it combines to form a double helix, a structure that is no longer liable to corrosion from external chemicals, but having a structure that is actually more adapted to different chemical environments by preventing erosion from other areas. In that way, RNA does eventually lead to a more efficient molecule that is more efficient at carrying hereditary information from one generation to the other. And with all that, it is safe to say that DNA is just basically two highly compatible mutated RNA molecules that took the ideology of teamwork way too seriously and now hold hands for life. So whether it's up to you fighting someone else, people getting into wars, crimes, or even you fighting against a given disease, all you have to understand that this is just RNA fighting other types of RNA for superiority. It's not that deep. Every time you hug, smile, or fall in love, these are processes that are regulated on a cellular level, either chemically through hormone production or electrically through nerve impulse signals. At the bottom line, when we zero in into each organism, we do tend to find a group of organs working together to ensure productivity of a system, and further down the line, we do tend to find cells ensuring functionality of organs, and within the beating heart of its cell is a nucleus, where we find DNA in the nucleus together with cytoplasmic RNA that is made from the nuclear DNA at the same time. Whenever you cry, whenever you feel the urge to eat, you're all being commanded by RNA. It is the fact of life that we face. Our bodies are highly efficient organisms and systems that have been created for the perfect reproductive abilities and transfer of RNAs from one generation to the other, ensuring the survival and continuity of RNA. As we tend to see when our bodies get infested by diseases, take an example, COVID-19, a virus that is again systematically at the basis made of RNA. It's just RNA trying to invade a perfectly organized system made by another group of RNA. It's about the battle for the fittest. So eventually it comes down to RNA fighting each other, be it war, be it anything that involves living organisms. It's just a group of RNA fighting against another group of RNA for survival. And when it narrows down to reproduction, it's RNA coming together, exchanging their own hereditary traits to ensure the progress and production of even more better and more feasible RNA molecules. So when you come to me and you ask me what is life, I'll tell you that life is basically what RNA wants it to be. And life only exists for us in this case to pass on RNA to the next generation. And in that case, it does sum up to a little simple, terrifying fact that we are just puppets of our own RNA. Thank you.